Hey guys, I'm Lena, and today we are going to be talking about the doubters, the ones who think that they're too old to start learning a language and that doubt themselves, those who think that it's too late. I'm also going to be talking about how to actually do it, how to actually start. I'm going to be explaining everything as in-depth as I can, so let's get started. Okay, so before I start telling you how to start learning a language, I'm going to tell you why it is not too late. So, speaking frankly, it is easier for a child to learn a language. They pick up certain things better and memorize things better. But the good news is you don't have to be a child to learn a new language and speak it fluently. The way to do that is to research techniques that work for you, and there are so many. There are also research-backed techniques that will help you throughout this process of learning the language. As I've said before in my previous video, immersion is key. Immersion is really important, especially when you're an adult. I've talked about immersion in depth in my previous video, and I feel like or I hope that it got to a lot of people. So the main memo here is the more you hear or see the language in front of you or around you, the more forced it becomes for you to learn it. And I mean this in the most positive version of the word force. And it definitely depends on the techniques the person is using. Sometimes we think we're using the right techniques and the right ways to do something or to learn something, but in the end we find out that we weren't this whole time. I like to say this in every single one of my videos because I feel like again, a lot of people neglect it, and it's like an overused cliche quote. After a while, nobody starts really listening to it. Everybody's like, I've heard this thousands of times before. I already know this. I'm not going to perceive it. I'm not going to understand it because I've already heard it a lot of times and I don't want to perceive it. And the same thing happens with this when a person tells you practice, practice, and practice for language learning, and that is literally the most important thing in that process. After a while, people just don't listen. It's a cliche for a reason. So also consistency is key, and especially when you're an adult, sometimes consistency can be a hard thing to achieve or to have, but nonetheless it is important, and I want you to remember it and try to stick to doing at least like one exercise a day. Try not to rely on one source. I feel like that would be like my one advice to adults, especially because you know, again, we can see it in children's lives how when little kids are learning a language, they always like pick up on different sources. I wouldn't just stick to a tutor if you have one. I would, download a language learning app. I've actually done a video on this, so you should check it out. It was very in-depth, very kind of, I was discussing a lot of language learning apps that I tried. Okay, now that we've got that done, let's get on with the how to start portion. Okay, so a lot of people want to learn a language. It's something you have the random motivation to do at 3 a.m. randomly, and say, well, from tomorrow I'm gonna wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm gonna learn a language. You end up waking up at 10 and not doing anything. It happens far too many times to count in our lives. But a good way to start, I'm just gonna give you the tips. It's gonna change your life, I hope. So let's go. So basing on my experience and my experience with language learning entirely, the way that I started learning most of my languages were through movies, actually. Movies are a great way to learn language. The way I did it is I always watched the movie in its original language. It's like my one rule. So just watch the movie, the film, the TV in that original language, and also try to find the movies and shows and in the language that you're learning, because I feel like you could also, take your favorite English movie, for example, and then watch it dubbed in the language that you're learning. I don't think that's very wise. It does interfere with a bunch of stuff, and you would perceive it much better if you watched the movie in its original language, which you're learning. So, the second one Something that not a lot of people do is opening a textbook. A lot of people hate textbooks and hate paper, and actually writing something out and reading it on paper, for me, was much easier than reading it on screen, even if it was sometimes at times or most of the time easier. And then moving on from textbooks, we're going to workbooks. So I have this little French workbook right now. It has helped me a lot, and I feel like I understand some things much better just because I've practiced them so much. You can find a bunch of textbooks like this that offer a lot of exercises. For me, this one in particular has little rule pages, and then you can practice a bunch of sentences. When something is written out, I feel like I have like the urge to fill it in. I don't know. But when something's on my computer, for example, I feel like I can just leave it halfway and then not do it. I don't know why, but the paper just motivates me to write. It's a great way to start, especially because most of these textbooks have either tomes, or at the beginning they usually start with the first theme, the second theme, the third theme. So you learn basically everything through these textbooks. So you can find a textbook that's suitable for you. You can find one that's colorful with pictures if you have a photographic memory and have and perceive things better when there's a picture next to it. You can find something like this as well. Very plain, very black and white. I feel like I work better when it's really bland. As I told you, there has to be multiple ways of learning something. So textbook is a really great way to kind of support your little grammar and everything else. And then from the start, I want you to buy a dictionary. I have a little French dictionary with me right now. These kinds of ones are usually incredibly nice because they are visual, as it says on here, and they have a bunch of pictures, and it's just great. There are so many brands that sell dictionaries like this that are small, compact, visual, have a lot of pictures, and it's very clear. So it has these little pictures that have definitions under them, and I love how in-depth this is. So it has a lot of things to choose from, and you can find a definition for almost anything, which I love. I love the theme aspect of this. I feel like it's really easy to navigate and find something when it's like that. Again, as I said before, there are a lot of these dictionaries, and they really range from again, plain ones to colorful and visual ones. I actually prefer visual dictionaries in contrast to my preference in textbooks and workbooks, because I feel like it's nice to see something and then kind of associate that picture with the definition, and yeah. Okay, so for the next one, I'm actually going to give you a little example, so you can kind of judge everything on that and conclude some things or infer anything that you will. So when you organize something beforehand, you kind of have to do it, especially when it's something that it took a lot to commit to. Go and organize it. Go and schedule it. Say, I'm going to be learning a language every day. I'm going to be practicing it every day, but I'm going to be having full-on an hour, 2-hour lessons every Wednesday and Saturday. So what that makes me is obligated to complete those tasks. I would have a little calendar or a little journal. I would write it in my phone so I could see it all the time. Something that I would commit to. It will leave you just in a very pleasant feeling that you have something to look forward to. A lot of people think that language learning is not a pleasant thing when it is literally the opposite. It is so nice, and I'm speaking from experience. I'm speaking from things I've heard other people say. It can feel difficult, but it is really a pleasant process, and I'm sure you would enjoy it. So another thing that I've noticed is a lot of beginners would try to take on too much, biting off more than you can chew. It's really hard to stay in one place and practice that one thing until it's automatic. If you rush, you'll make mistakes. But going on from that point, don't be afraid of making mistakes. So try to stay in the moment and just know that being afraid will not do you any good. So yeah, there you go. Okay, so that is the end of my video for the people who don't know how to start a language or if it's too late to start a language. So yeah, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!